Hello, my little Luxxes. This is another episode of Luxxxy Charms, and I am your host, Cosplayer Charsie Luxxx. Please come gather around the campfire because this is also another episode of ghost stories my father used to tell me. Hello again. I hope you are all nice and comfortable next to the fire. If you are new to my channel, welcome to the campfire. Everyone who loves ghost stories are welcome here. But I must come with a warning for everyone on this episode. This ghost story is very dark and gruesome. It is not for the faint of heart. This is also not a ghost story that my father told. This is actually one that I have written myself. And it is based off of a true story. So if you are prepared for this dark ghost story, come join me as I talk about Lady Elizabeth. The year is 1610, and it is a frigid, dreary December evening in the Kingdom of Hungary. Anna was trying her hardest to stay warm, and she was bundled up in an oversized cloak. She was following her parents as they were walking up the snowy cobblestone path towards Lady Elizabeth's castle. They were running a little bit behind in time, and the sun was quickly setting. Luckily, it looked like the pathway leading up to the castle was brightly lit by several flickering candle lanterns. As Anna followed her parents up to the front door, she peered up to the large structure that lay before her, and a huge shiver went up her spine. She had a bad feeling about this plan. Her family was poor, and for some extra funds, Lady Elizabeth was going to pay her parents to come work for them, so she was basically a hired hand to be a hand servant at the castle. Of course, she had absolutely no say in the matter, for she was only 14 years old. Once her family made it up to the wooden front door, her father had clanged the giant metal knockers against the door, and Anna swore she could hear the sound echoing throughout the castle grounds. Only a few moments went by when a middle-aged servant lady came to the front door. She gave them a questioning look until Anna's father had explained to her why they were there. He had, of course, explained that they were welcomed by Lady Elizabeth. "You are late," the servant lady tells them. "Yes, I apologize for that. We got lost on the way looking for the castle," Anna's father explains. "Yes, it is difficult to find if you have never been here before, but the Countess will still not be pleased nonetheless," the servant says, then quickly adds, "Say your goodbyes, and then the young lady must follow me, and I will quickly put you to work." Still feeling very uneasy about this situation, Anna sadly turns to her parents to say their goodbyes. They each give her a hug and a kiss goodbye, and her father hands her a small burlap sack containing all of her personal belongings. The servant lady appears to be very annoyed, so her parents decide to hurry up. They say goodbye, and they head back down the cobblestone path leading out of the courtyard. Anna sadly watches them as they walk away. "Are you coming?" the servant lady crossly says. "It's quite cold tonight. I would like to close the front door." "Yes, ma'am," Anna says, and she quickly rushes through the front door. After the servant lady closes the front door, she indicates for Anna to follow her. Timidly following behind the servant lady, Anna keeps looking around. She had never been inside of a place as expensive as this place. She is completely mesmerized by the beauty of this place as she is led up to a large staircase that has very expensive and heavy tapestries all over it, and it is very brightly lit by more candlelit lanterns. "First, I will show you to your room," said the servant as she points up to the second floor. They both climb the candlelit stairs. She so badly wants to start asking questions, but she's too scared to ask anything. Once on the second floor, the servant goes over to a very bulky end table and picks up a single candle, and they continue down a very dark hallway. Anna can barely see anything in front of her face. Another uneasy shiver goes up her spine. It feels as if they had been walking forever, until they had finally come to a small wooden door at the very end of the hallway. Slowly, the servant opens a very creaky, old wooden door and motions for Anna to enter the room. Completely scared, she shuffles inside the room, but she can't see a thing because there's not a single ounce of light in this room. So she goes to turn to the servant lady to see if she can collect the candle from her. But before she can turn around, something very heavy smashes into the back of her head. The world goes completely dark around Anna. With an aching pain and a terrible headache, Anna begins to wake up. She slowly opens her eyes. She finds it so hard to focus on anything. Through her blurry vision, she tries to make out the objects that are around her. She goes to move, but she's completely surprised to find that she cannot move at all. It dawns on her that something is horribly wrong. As her eyesight finally starts to become clear, she sees that she is on top of a wooden table. As she looks down her own body, she is horrified to find that she is tied down to this table with heavy, rusty chains. She lets out a very horrified cry. She tries to fight against the restraints, but finds that she cannot move them at all. She tries to fight against the tears and the fear that she feels, but she can't stop herself from weeping. Crying will only make her come faster. Try to stay quiet, and she won't come. Anna hears a tiny voice say from beside her. Looking around the dimly candlelit room was difficult to do at first. Still trying to adjust her eyes, Anna saw that there were many tables in this room, and that on one of the tables across from her had many different strange tools and unknown objects to her. She could see many ropes and chains all around the room as well, attached to the wall or attached to other different tables. Some tables were even more strange and were up on their side, and they appeared to be held up by a system of gears. It was on one of these tables that Anna could finally see that there was a young girl tied up to one of them. She was about the same age and size as Anna as well. She had on a green gown that was torn and bloody, and Anna originally would have thought that this would have been a fine dress if it wasn't for the fact that it had now been destroyed. The girl's long brunette hair was matted with chunks of dried blood. Anna just stared at the strange sight in front of her eyes. "What's happening? Why are we here?" Anna managed to cry out. "Keep your voice down," the girl said in a very low tone, although I guess it really doesn't matter. She will come, no matter what. She just comes faster if you make noise. Anna tries to stop herself from crying, and she just takes large gulps of air. After she feels like she can speak again, and quietly, she asks, "What is this place?" "It's a dungeon of sorts," the girl says. "A bad place. A place where we get hurt. A place where we get tortured." We get tortured? Anna squeaks out. "Yes," the girl worriedly says to her. "By who?" Anna asks. "By the lady of this castle, of course," she tells her. "By Lady Elizabeth?" Anna asks, her eyes widening. She had heard terrible stories about the woman and just how scary she could be, but she was hoping that all of these stories were completely untrue. "Yes, her, but she is no lady at all. She's a monster. She's a vampire," the girl says as tiny tears begin to well up into her eyes. "Oh, come now, child. I'm not that bad," a woman's voice says from beside Anna. Both girls let out a small scream of surprise. Anna turned to see that a lovely woman only stood about 3 feet away from her. She was very richly dressed in a red gown that had black fur trimmed along it. Her hair was neatly piled on top of her head into a very tight bun. Standing beside the richly dressed woman was the servant lady that Anna had been with before. The women both began to walk towards the poor girl tied to the sideways table. "No, please, Lady Elizabeth, please don't hurt me," the little girl cries out. "While you are in my house, you will call me Countess," Lady Elizabeth says, "and I refuse to be disrespected in my house." While standing next to the crying girl, Lady Elizabeth examines the table next to her. Being close to it, Anna could also see the many different tools and hammers sitting on top of it. But she sees that the Countess comes upon a pair of silver shears. She gleefully picks them up. As soon as she grabs the shears, the young girl starts to repeatedly plead, "No, no!" This only makes the Countess smile. She walks over to the terrified girl and she waves the shears in front of her face. "You can tell me no as many times as you want, child, but it will not work. This is my house," the Countess tells her, and then stabs her into the side with the shears. As they pierce her side, she lets out a tiny little wail of pain. Then the Countess continues to say, "I will not be disrespected in my house." She removes the shears from the girl's side, and the servant quickly shows up with a metal bucket in order to collect the blood that was draining from the wound. Anna is scared beyond comprehension. The young girl continues to try and plead and bargain with the Countess. "Please, my family has money. Please stop this. My father can give you anything that you want. Please, all you have to do is stop this." "Dear child, your father has already given me exactly what I want. And that's you. I need you," the Countess says with a smirk on her face. "But why?" the young girl cries. "I need your youth. I need your blood," the Countess says, and she holds the shears up against the girl's throat. With a quick flick of her wrist, she slices the girl's throat wide open. The poor girl tries to scream out, but because of the open wound in her neck, she is unable to make a single sound. The servant quickly moves her bucket up to this new wound, trying to collect the blood again. Anna can only watch the horrific scene with wide eyes, and she can do nothing to stop it. "My lady, you know this is not the best way to collect blood. We should have moved her first," the servant finally speaks. I know, said the Countess, and she waved the bloody shears towards the poor, dying girl. "But these noble girls really piss me off. They act like they have the power to bribe me. I won't have it." Then the Countess finally turns to look at Anna for the first time. Anna lets out a very tiny whimper, but she quickly tries to stifle it back, and she manages to keep quiet. With silent steps, the Countess walks over to her. It was only a few feet, but it felt like an eternity for her to approach her. Once she stood before her, Anna could see that the woman was completely drenched from head to toe in blood. She stared down at Anna with complete distaste. "I don't know why I bother with these peasant girls anymore," she says. "Do you just want me to dispose of her, my lady?" the servant lady asks as she still struggles to collect the blood. No need. I won't waste her. She just brings me so little power compared to the noble girls," the Countess says with a scowl towards Anna, and then raises her bloody shears above the poor girl. Anna stares up in horror at the sight that lay before her. Her mind had absolutely no time to process as the silver shears come straight down and the blades pierce her straight into her shoulder. Anna screams out in horrific agony. The Countess only smirks and pulls the shears slowly out of the poor girl's wound. "Just so you know your place," said the Countess, and she smelled the blood on the shears. She then turns away from Anna and makes her way back to the table full of tools. She looks over at the servant and says, "When you are finished there, hurry up and come help me." The servant nods her head and sets down the bucket full of blood. She moves away from the now very limp body of the noble girl. Once they are together at the table, they grab a silver chalice and put it in front of them. The Countess takes the bloody shears and starts to drip the blood into the chalice. The servant grabs a few other items from on top of the table and also adds it to the cup. Once it is together with the blood, they stir the concoction together, and then the servant picks up the chalice and holds it carefully in front of the Countess. Anna, while trying so hard to ignore the pain in her shoulder, watches as they say a very strange prayer in unison. Once finished, the servant hands the chalice over to the Countess, and without hesitation, the Countess drinks the blood-infused potion. Anna could swear she saw a dark aura fall upon the very scary woman as she was drinking the blood from the cup. Through all the pain and fear, tears finally started to fall from Anna's eyes. "Lady Elizabeth," a male voice said from beyond the room. Anna could hear the voice, but strangely it appeared that Lady Elizabeth and the servant could not hear it. So Anna just wondered if she had imagined it. But then she watched as the door next to her quickly was flung open. She could hear a bit of a tussle going on at the doorway as 3 people appeared in front of her. It appeared to be another servant who was trying to block two men from entering into the torture room. But the two tall men easily pushed their way past the servant and entered into the room. Completely caught off guard, the Countess and the middle-aged servant set down the chalice and turned to face the men. "I demand to know what is this intrusion," said the Countess as she scowled at the men. "I'm so sorry, milady. I could not stop them from entering the room," said the little servant who tried to stop the men, and she quickly fell down to her knees in the room. The first man steps forward and completely ignores the Countess's words, and he begins scanning the room. He looks completely disgusted by what he saw. The second man also comes up beside him and does the exact same thing, and you can just tell the horror that the men were looking at before them. Both men lay their eyes upon poor Anna tied to the table, and then turn to look at the dead girl now hanging from the sideways table. They see the Countess and the servant beside her. "And I demand to know what is the meaning of this room, Lady Elizabeth," the tallest man commanded her. After he spoke, it appeared that the Countess recognized the man, and she instantly began to get concern over her face. "George, what are you doing here?" the Countess asks. "With this horrific sight in front of my face, Countess, I think you know exactly why I'm here," George said, and then continued. "I'm the Palatine of Hungary, and I am placing you under arrest for kidnapping and for murder." George had pointed over to the officer who had come with him and had asked him to begin arresting the Countess and her servants. At first, the middle-aged servant went to grab a hammer on the table so that she could fight with the man, but the Countess only shook her head. "We will go with these men with dignity and with grace. We will not fight," the Countess tells them, and the servants immediately stop fighting. "Besides, these officers cannot harm me. I am untouchable," she says, and she glares at the men. While his officer is placing restraints on the Countess and her followers, George walks over to the noble girl who is now limp against the table. He looks her over and then says, "This is Lady Catherine, is it not?" "You know it is," the Countess tells him. "You killed her?" George angrily said. The Countess says nothing. George shakes his head in disgust and walks over to Anna. He looks her over and sees the wound in her shoulder. He quickly tries to remove the chains, but sees that he needs a key in order to remove them. He turns to the Countess and asks, "Where's the key?" "Help yourself to any of the keys on the table," the Countess says, and indicates to a pile of keys sitting atop of the wooden table before her. George only glares at her. She finally shrugs her shoulders and says, "Fine, it's in the pocket of my servant over here." George walks over to the servant and takes the key from her pocket and returns back to Anna. He unlocks the chains and carefully examines the wound on Anna's shoulder. He takes a clean handkerchief from his pocket and carefully tries to wrap up the wound. "Who are you, child?" George asks Anna. "She's no one," the Countess says. "She's only a peasant." "Everyone is someone, Lady Elizabeth, whether they are noble or a peasant," George says, and then turns his attention back to Anna. "What is your name, child?" Anna," Anna manages to stammer out. "Anna, let's say we get you far, far away from this castle." So Anna was rescued by the officers, and Lady Elizabeth and her followers were all arrested. With only a day of trial, they were all found guilty of their gruesome crimes. All 4 of the Countess's followers were all sentenced to death. They were all killed only within days of the trial. However, Lady Elizabeth's punishment was for her to be banished and placed under house arrest for the rest of her life. She was locked inside of her own tower at the top of her castle. She was locked inside, and every single window was bricked up, and she was to be left in complete and total darkness while she was locked inside of her tower. She was never to see the light of day ever again, and she lived a very lonely life at the top of her tower until her death in 1614. So, does this story sound familiar by chance? If your guess is that this sounds a little bit like the story of Lady Elizabeth Bathory, then you would be 100% correct. Today's ghost story was very loosely based off of the true story of Lady Bathory. a woman who is rumored to have murdered over 650 women and girls. Now, I don't know if I believe that she had killed that many people, but it is still highly likely that she had killed multiple people through her life. But we have also stumbled upon this month's theme, and for the month of June, we are going to be talking about Elizabeth Bathory, who is also known as the Blood Countess or Countess Dracula. So I'm extremely excited for this month. We know how much I love horror films, I love ghost stories, and I love just the element of horror in general, and I also love true crime. So I figured for this whole entire month, I was going to mix all of the ideas and elements together. Please stay tuned for next week as I will be reviewing a horror movie that involves the Blood Countess. Thank you for joining me on another ghost stories my father used to tell me here on Luxxxy Charms. And yes, this definitely was not a ghost story by my father, but this was actually written by me. It just kind of a little something I threw together for today's episode. But I kind of like where this storyline is evolving on my channel here, and I'm definitely ready to come up with more ghost stories on my own. Of course, we know that my original love of ghost stories stems from hearing all these different wonderful stories from my dad, and don't worry, we will definitely be getting more of his stories in the future as well. You can find me, Charsie Luxxx, on my Twitter for Charsie Luxxx, and that's with 3 X's for Luxxx. You can find me on my Instagram for Charsie87, and I have another YouTube channel that I do with my friend DC, and it is Little Channel of Horrors. Thank you once again for joining me at the campfire, and until next time, my little X's, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and definitely stay safe out there. Bye!